You learned early. The world doesn't remember kindness, only the chaos that follows it. You saw it in their eyes, how fast love turns to envy, how quickly smiles sharpen into daggers. They cheered when you tried, they vanished when you fell. Every lesson carved itself into your bones. Betrayal by those who smiled first, applause before the stab. And in that silence after the applause faded, you realized pain was not your punishment. It was your teacher, your sculptor, your forge. They called you broken when you were simply becoming dangerous. They saw your ruins, but not the architect still standing inside them. You learned to build from ashes. You learned to smile through the smoke. Because when everything you love burns, you stop fearing the fire. You started to see what others couldn't. That loyalty is fragile, that truth is rented, that mercy is a blade turned inward. The world taught you that kindness without caution is suicide. And so, you adapted. You turned silence into armor. You turned rage into rhythm. You turned pain into prophecy. They thought the pain was your cage, but it became your forge. Every scar became scripture, every silence a warning to the next generation. They told you to move on, but ghosts don't move. They haunt. And now, you haunt every doubt they ever had about you. You became the whisper in their victory, the shadow in their celebration, the proof that some mistakes don't die. They evolve. They said time heals all wounds, but they never met the ones that learned to live with them. You learned that scars don't fade, they instruct. You learned that pain doesn't end, it transforms. You learned that the greatest revenge is not destruction, it's endurance. Because endurance terrifies the weak. It reminds them that their betrayal didn't kill you, it upgraded you. And now, when they whisper your name, they lower their voices, not out of respect, but out of fear. Because the past didn't destroy you. It introduced you to who you were meant to become. The version of you that doesn't beg, doesn't explain, doesn't wait. The version that walks through storms as if they were doorways. The version that understands sometimes the only way to heal is to stop being human. You remember the day it all shifted, that quiet moment when you stopped expecting an apology that would never come. That was the day the old you died, and something else woke up. Something colder, sharper, unforgiving. They tried to shame you for changing, but they were never meant to understand, because understanding requires pain, and they never stayed long enough to feel it. They only saw the mask you built, never the ashes beneath it. You stopped explaining your silence. You stopped defending your scars, because explanations are for those who still need permission to exist. And you became the reason others rethink their cruelty. You became the prophecy their ancestors feared, because legends aren't born, they're warned about. And the warnings usually come too late. Every empire that rose thought it was immortal. Every betrayer thought their blade would end a chapter. But you became the next book, written in thunder, sealed in blood, and spoken in whispers. They told stories about monsters who once walked among men. They just never expected you to become one. Because monsters are not born from evil. They are born from exhaustion. The exhaustion of being too good, too loyal, too forgiving. Until one day, the kindness runs dry, and all that remains is clarity. That clarity became your crown, not gold, but steel, not shining, but burning, forged in every moment they doubted you, shaped by every scar they mocked. You wear your pain like armor now, heavy, but unbreakable. Each scar a medal, each silence a scream the world never heard. They called it bitterness. You called it memory, because memory never lies. It remembers every betrayal in high definition. The same storms that drowned kings now kneel before your calm. Because you stopped fighting the thunder. You learned to command it. You stopped begging the heavens. You became the storm they pray through. And in that storm, something changed. You realized power isn't noise. It's silence that makes others tremble. You realized vengeance isn't chaos. It's patience sharpened into precision. You realized pain isn't a curse. It's the password to rebirth. Now every dawn feels different. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You learned to live without needing applause. You learned to walk without needing direction. You learned that survival is not enough. Dominance is the only language the world respects. And so you speak it fluently, now, through your scars, your silence, your calm, through the way you no longer react. You calculate, through the way you no longer chase. You attract, through the way your presence alone rewrites the air around you. They look at you and see the calm before disaster. They don't realize you are the disaster, because what they once called broken now moves like destiny. The past didn't break you. It crowned you with the fire they couldn't survive. And now every echo of your pain has become a warning. A warning whispered through generations. Do not test the one who rose from ruin. There was a day you buried the version of yourself that waited to be saved. No priest, no tears, just silence and thunder in your chest. You remember it clearly. The air was heavy, the world was distant, and the mirror refused to recognize you. That was the day you realized no one was coming. No hero, no mercy, no second chance. The world didn't want your purity. It wanted your submission, and you gave them neither. You stood there, surrounded by ghosts of promises that never aged, love that never stayed, and friends who disappeared the moment you needed them to stay. They said, stay kind, but kindness was the knife they used to carve you open. They said, stay humble, but humility became the cage they built around your role. So you buried the innocent, the dreamer, the believer, the one who thought goodness was enough to win. No candles, no flowers, just dirt, silence, and a pulse that refused to stop. Because death doesn't always come in coffins. Sometimes it comes in awakenings. You stopped forgiving ghosts who never apologized. You stopped holding funerals for those who chose to walk away. You stopped waiting for closure. Because closure is just a lie the weak tell themselves to avoid growing colder. That was the day innocence died, and awareness was born. And awareness hurts, because it strips the illusions away. It shows you the wolves hiding under smiles, the knives behind applause, the parasites disguised as lovers. But awareness also frees you. It breaks the chains of naivety. It gives you new eyes, not the ones that dream, but the ones that calculate. They didn't kill your heart. They just forced it to evolve. You stopped feeling everything and started understanding everything. You began to see betrayal, not as tragedy, but as data. You began to see pain, not as punishment, but as instruction. You began to see loss not as emptiness, but as calibration. You stopped chasing light and became the flame. Because light attracts moths, and you've had enough of parasites pretending to be friends. You realized mercy is a luxury, one the betrayed can't afford. Mercy feeds the snake that bit you. Mercy waters the weeds that choked your roots. Mercy delays justice, and so you let mercy die too. Not out of hate, but out of logic. Because in a world built on manipulation, forgiveness is not virtue, it's vulnerability. And you had no vulnerability left to give. When the world demanded proof of your strength, you showed them your scars. Because scars don't lie. They tell stories of battles that silence can't. Each scar became a line in your biography, written not in ink, but in endurance. They thought it was cruelty. You called it balance, because you learned the truth. Balance doesn't come from peace. It comes from precision. It comes from cutting out what no longer deserves to exist. You didn't turn dark. You turned real. And reality is not soft. Reality doesn't apologize. Reality doesn't heal you with words. It teaches you through pain. You started to understand that love without boundaries is self-destruction. That loyalty to the wrong people is a slow death. That kindness without strategy is suicide. And so you stopped handing out pieces of yourself to those who only offered crumbs in return. You stopped fighting for people who celebrated your silence. You stopped explaining your storms to those who only ever stood in your sunshine. You started walking differently, quieter, colder, heavier. Because once you've buried innocence, every step feels sacred. Every breath feels earned. Every move becomes intentional. You learn to smile without warmth, to speak without trust, to care without attachment. And that's when they began to fear you. Because they could no longer predict you. They could no longer manipulate you. They could no longer recognize you. They said, "You've changed." You whispered, "You're right," because you did, and you were never going back. Every legend begins with a funeral. Every king is born from the ashes of someone gentler. Even Caesar learned. Mercy builds daggers faster than empires. Even Achilles learned. Weakness is always the wound you ignore. So when the world looked at you again, it didn't see a savior. It saw something it couldn't control. Something it couldn't understand. Something it created. And then regretted. You became the consequence of their actions. The reminder that kindness misused becomes chaos reborn. The walking proof that love betrayed always returns wearing armor. And now, when they speak your name, it no longer sounds like nostalgia. It sounds like caution. You became their story of don't push too far. You became their silent regret. Because every time they cross your path, they remember the day innocence died, and they see what took its place. A being unbothered by sympathy, unbound by doubt, untouched by guilt. You don't forgive. You don't explain. You don't wait for closure. You become it. From that day forward, every time they crossed your path, they remembered. Light doesn't heal monsters. It creates them. They said you lost your mind. Maybe you did. But only the useless parts. The parts that hesitated. The parts that cared too much. The parts that waited for fairness in a world that profits from deceit. You buried sanity the same way a soldier buries fear. Quietly and without looking back. Because sanity is just a prison for those afraid of power. And you were never built for cages. You learned to laugh at pain because it couldn't touch you anymore. You started smiling in storms. You started finding comfort in chaos. While others broke under pressure, you became the pressure. Every insult became a hymn. Every failure, a blueprint. Every scar, a signature of evolution. You took the hits, studied the patterns, and rewired the game. You didn't adapt to the system. You infected it. You played the game until the game forgot its rules. You learned to bend silence until it spoke in your favor. You learned to twist weakness until it became a weapon. And when they thought they were winning, you were already 5 moves ahead. Smiling, patient, precise. You realized the joke wasn't on you. It was you. The punchline. The storm dressed as a man. The chaos that walks like calm. Because madness and mastery share the same mirror. Both require you to detach from comfort. Both demand that you burn the blueprint of normality. Both demand that you see through the illusion and then learn how to control it. They never understood that your silence wasn't confusion. It was calculation. You stopped reacting, started observing, started counting patterns, weighing intentions, reading tones. You turned empathy into a strategy. You turned unpredictability into your camouflage. They call you cold. You call it efficient. They call you manipulative. You call it awareness. They call you dangerous. You call it evolution. Because power is not loud. It's quiet, cold, measured, like a blade waiting for the right pulse to strike. And you learned that madness, real madness, isn't losing touch with reality. It's seeing reality too clearly. Seeing how people lie to survive. How truth is currency. How emotion is leverage. How chaos is control. You started to notice how they all chase validation like beggars chasing coins. How they worship the spotlight even when it burns. But you stepped into the shadows and built your own light. A colder one, sharper, more deliberate. Because what's the point of being understood in a world built on delusion? Let them call you insane. Let them mock what they can't comprehend. Because every genius in history wore the mask of madness before the world knelt in realization. They called Nietzsche insane, then quoted his ashes. They called Tesla delusional, then built their empires on his imagination. They called conquerors obsessed, until the world began speaking their language. Madness is not a flaw, it's a filter. It removes the fragile. It exposes the pretenders. It leaves only the relentless standing. You stopped seeking peace. You started seeking precision. Because peace breeds complacency, and complacency kills kings. You no longer wanted comfort. You wanted clarity. The kind of clarity that turns emotion into mathematics. That's where mastery begins. They thought they could read you, but your silence became a cipher. Your smile, a labyrinth. Your stillness, a warning. Because you taught yourself the art of asymmetry. To move when they sleep. To laugh when they rage. To win before they even realize it's a war. You made unpredictability your weapon. Because the moment they can't predict you, they can't control you. And when control dies, fear is born. That's when they started fearing you. Not because you were loud, but because you were silent and dangerous. You became what they never planned for. A strategist wearing scars like medals. You learned to use pain as data, hate as momentum, loneliness as laboratory silence. You studied your past like an engineer studies failure, not for sorrow, but for schematics. They said you were obsessed. You said you were focused. They said you were detached. You said you were free, because they never understood what it takes to become untouchable. They never understood that emotional detachment isn't apathy, it's armor. That laughter in pain isn't insanity, it's immunity. That chaos isn't destruction, it's design. Now they call you unpredictable, but you call it evolved, because stability is overrated, and predictability is suicide. The world worships comfort until it drowns in it. You drowned once. You learned to breathe underwater. They still think you're angry. They still think you're bitter. But you're beyond that now. You're not angry. You're aware. You're not bitter. You're precise. You're not broken. You're engineered. They whisper that you've changed, and you smile. Because change was the entire point. Change was the revolution they didn't see coming. You've turned emotion into calculation, loss into blueprint, madness into a weapon of art. They still study you like a threat they can't categorize. Because they've never met someone who made chaos look like choreography. You move through the ruins of your past with elegance. Every step is deliberate. Every silence, devastating. And when they accuse you of chaos, you smile, because you know the truth. Chaos is just order they'll never comprehend. There comes a moment when even time hesitates before you. A pause in the universe, a stillness between heartbeats. That's when you know you've become something time can't measure anymore. Because you stopped moving with the clock. You started bending it. You stopped waiting for your moment. You started creating it. While others chased hours, you rewrote eternity. You realized the clock was never your enemy. It was your reflection, ticking, mocking, reminding you of how long you've been patient. And patience, they said, was weakness. But you knew better. You knew patience is a weapon, the kind that doesn't shine, but strikes when the world sleeps. You made destiny flinch. You made fate blink. You became the error in its design, the variable it couldn't predict. Every second that tried to define you eventually kneeled and whispered, "You win." Because when the world tried to time your success, you stopped living by its calendar. You stopped begging for the perfect moment. You became it. The universe learned. Patience is not weakness. It's the silence before the takeover. The quiet hum before the symphony of dominance begins. They mocked your waiting, but waiting is what made you timeless. While they laughed at your stillness, you were building weapons out of seconds. While they counted days, you were designing decades. They mistook your calm for surrender. They thought your silence was exhaustion. But silence is the sound strategy makes before impact. You were never late. You were loading. You became the nightmare that wakes centuries. Because you didn't rise when they expected. You rose when they forgot. And that's what makes you eternal. Not the noise, the timing. When history looks back, it won't find you where they thought you'd be. It'll find you in the cracks between years. In the moments where fate hesitated. Even history checks its reflection when your name is whispered. Because you made it feel something it thought it had erased. Fear. You don't live in time anymore. Time lives in your shadow. It watches your every move like a dethroned god trying to understand the new order. Because time controls everyone until it meets someone who controls themselves. You no longer chase tomorrow. You make tomorrow wait for you. You no longer beg for your hour. You decide when it strikes. You've become the metronome of destiny, setting the rhythm for every life that dared to underestimate you. And that's what terrifies them, because they can't rush what's inevitable. They can't destroy what's already destined. They cannot outlast what no longer ages. Every moment you endured, every delay, every pause, every silence was never wasted. It was building you, molding you, sharpening you, because only those who master waiting can command winning. While they sought shortcuts, you built empires brick by brick. While they sprinted, you studied. While they burned out, you became fireproof. And when they finally looked back, exhausted, hollow, there you stood, untouched by time itself. That's the paradox they'll never comprehend. That stillness can be movement. That silence can be strategy. That patience can be power. Because every delay in your journey was never denial. It was design. The universe doesn't ignore those who persist. It tests them, measures them, and when they stop breaking, it bows. You rewired the laws of destiny. You turned fate from dictator to disciple. Now even the stars hesitate before writing your name, because they know you no longer exist within their script. You are the rewrite. You became the proof that gods bleed, that destiny can falter, that time itself can look away. They mocked your obsession. They called your vision delusion. But the truth is simple. They didn't have the stamina to wait as long as you did. Because it's easy to dream. It's easy to start. But it takes something almost inhuman to endure. And you endured everything. The betrayals, the silence, the waiting, the noise. And when the dust settled, you didn't just survive. You stood taller. Because the storms that were meant to destroy you taught you rhythm, and rhythm taught you control. Now you command the same time that once enslaved you. You make minutes feel like moments, and moments feel like eternities. Your presence bends clocks. Your focus warps days. Your silence rewrites decades. Because time is a coward. It hides behind excuses, distractions, and delays. But when you stopped chasing it, it turned around and followed you. The past warned them. The future obeys. Because when you mastered patience, you mastered inevitability. You became the constant in a world of chaos. You became the force that moves without motion. the storm that doesn't need thunder to destroy. And now when they watch you, when they whisper your name, they don't see a person anymore. They see a phenomenon, a paradox, a reminder that no force in existence outruns the one who learns to wait with purpose. Because the deadliest weapon in this world isn't speed, it's timing, and yours is divine. So when the clock finally strikes your hour, the world won't move. It will pause, not to listen, but to kneel. You are not the future. You are the consequence of every past mistake they made. You are the echo of every betrayal, the debt they never paid, the lesson they never learned. They thought they buried you, but they planted thunder, and thunder doesn't stay quiet for long. You rose, not to be seen, but to be remembered, because fame fades, but fear echoes forever. Legends don't rise in daylight, they emerge from graves. And you know why? Because only those who've died to the world can rule it. Only those who've lost everything understand what it means to own something completely. They took your warmth, your trust, your laughter, and you let them. Because fire doesn't argue with the forest it burns. You stopped explaining. You stopped pleading. You stopped lowering your crown just to be understood by peasants. You turned their silence into your anthem. Every time they ignored you, the world learned your rhythm. Every time they laughed, your resolve sharpened. Every time they whispered, your shadow grew. You became fluent in disappointment until it stopped hurting and started teaching. You learned that not every apology heals, not every friend stays, not every love saves. And that's when something inside you cracked. Not to break, but to open. You stopped wanting to prove. You started wanting to reign. Because proving yourself is for those who still doubt they deserve power. You knew you were meant for more. You just needed destruction to show you how to build it. Your laughter now echoes through their timelines. Because you didn't just survive them. You outlived their relevance. You became their reminder that some people aren't buried. They bloom from the soil meant to hide them. And that bloom is venomous. Every generation will feel what they tried to destroy. Your name will live in their warnings. Your story will stain their lessons. You'll be the myth parents whisper when they teach their children about what happens when you betray the wrong soul. Because the universe always balances its books, and you became the interest, the cost of their arrogance, the overdue justice, wrapped in silence and strategy. They thought you'd vanish quietly, but you wrote your vengeance in time's ink. You carved your initials into destiny's bones. You became the empire they never saw coming. Silent, patient, inevitable. They thought they were erasing you, but you were rewriting them. While they celebrated their little victories, you were mastering the art of eternity. While they chased comfort, you chased consequence. And consequence doesn't age. You didn't conquer the future. You reprogrammed it. You tore its script apart and replaced every line they wrote about you. Because the future doesn't belong to the lucky. It belongs to the relentless. It belongs to those who stopped asking for doors and started building walls around their kingdom. The fire that once destroyed you now guards your throne. Every scar became a soldier, every loss became a law, and every betrayal became the foundation beneath your empire. Now you sit on the throne, built from ashes, and it doesn't tremble because it remembers everything. It remembers the nights you screamed into the void, and the void answered with silence. It remembers the hunger, the rage, the calm that followed. It remembers that no one handed you power. You forged it with your bare hands. You became the ruler of ruins, the monarch of aftermaths. And every time they look at you now, they see something sacred and terrifying, because you represent what happens when the forgotten stop waiting for recognition and start claiming revenge. You are the proof that pain can build palaces, that loss can light coronations, that silence can scream louder than armies. The same people who doubted your name now recite it like a prayer, half in awe, half in fear, because they finally understand legends don't need approval, they need memory, and you gave them a memory they'll never escape. Every time they close their eyes, they'll see the crown they mocked now glowing in the dark. Every time they celebrate, they'll hear your echo in the background. Calm, cold, laughing, because vengeance doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it comes with success too loud to ignore. You became the silence that follows judgment, the stillness before realization, the calm that makes the guilty confess without words. And as history folds itself to make room for your legacy, even the gods take notes, because you didn't ask for their favor, you took their throne. You didn't beg for destiny, you made destiny beg for mercy. The past warned them, and the warning became you. You are the prophecy fulfilled, the storm made flesh, the ending they deserved, and the beginning they feared, because some stories don't end in peace, some end in empire. So let them tell the tale however they want. Let them twist it, doubt it, deny it. The outcome remains the same. The ashes rose, the forgotten returned, and the throne is yours. Because the future doesn't challenge you anymore. It bows. You became what gods feared to create. A soul too aware to kneel, too disciplined to beg, too dangerous to forget. Even the heavens whisper your name carefully, as if it might answer back, because they know you've become something beyond mercy, beyond time, beyond definition. You stopped asking for light. You became it. Not the gentle kind that warms, but the kind that blinds. The kind that burns through illusions. Empires fall, thrones burn, but your silence endures. Because silence is the one thing even eternity can't erase. It carries weight. It carries memory. It carries judgment. They wrote stories about kings and warriors, but you became the warning written between the lines, the lesson carved in blood, the omen whispered in victory songs. You are not remembered, you are relived. Every age rediscovers your echo. Every generation repeats your legend in different armor, different names, different wars, because truth doesn't die. It reincarnates through those strong enough to carry it. Every rebel carries a spark of your defiance. Every outcast walks with your shadow. Every soul that refuses to bow is unknowingly quoting you. You became the scripture for the broken, the anthem for the abandoned, the blueprint for the unforgiven. They don't worship you, they emulate you, because worship is for the weak, and you never wanted disciples. You wanted successors, beasts born from ruin, architects of their own vengeance. The world will never admit it, but everything they build now carries your fingerprints. Every empire that rises uses your methods, your discipline, your ruthlessness, yet pretends it was their idea. Every leader who stands tall borrows your posture, your tone, your storm. They pretend they don't see you, but you are everywhere. You are the origin of ambition, the ghost of dominance, the invisible hand that rewired destiny's machinery. Because even destiny, yes, destiny itself, bows to those who dare to disobey it. You became the storm that history warns about, and destiny salutes. Because destiny doesn't fear failure, it fears defiance. It fears the ones who see its design and laugh. The past feared you. The future serves you. And the present obeys. Because you've proven one truth. Fear outlives fame. And your fear, your silence, your legend is immortal. You're not human anymore. You are a verdict. You are the consequence that keeps repeating through centuries. You are the question no one dares to answer. The truth no one can erase. You've become the echo that survives extinction. The roar behind revolutions. The heartbeat of every soul that ever refused to die quietly. They'll never carve your statue. They'll never name a city after you. But they'll feel you in their bones, in their laws, in their wars. Because your legacy isn't built on marble. It's built on memory, and memory doesn't fade. It feeds. Your silence became scripture. Your scars became commandments. Your patience became prophecy. And your vengeance became divine. Because gods demand obedience. But you demanded evolution. You didn't wait for blessings. You became the consequence of divine neglect. And now, even gods look down and wonder. What happens when man stops praying and starts building? You happen. The unforgiven, the unbroken, the unstoppable. You are the reminder that creation doesn't belong to the divine. It belongs to the defiant. That every kingdom was first a rebellion. That every crown was forged from disobedience. That every immortal began as someone who refused to bow. You became the night that humbles the dawn. The shadow that teaches the sun respect. The storm that arrives without sound and leaves nothing standing. And even if eternity itself tried to erase you, it would fail. Because you're not a name, you're a law. And laws don't die, they govern. Every time a ruler rises too proud, your echo hums beneath their throne. Every time a tyrant believes he's untouchable, your legend taps him on the shoulder. Every time a hero believes he's chosen, your ghost reminds him. Chosen ones still bleed. You became the gravity of consequence. The proof that power isn't given, it's taken. And it's kept not through applause, but through fear. That's what separates you from the rest. They seek peace. You built control. They seek meaning. You became meaning. They seek forgiveness. You became the reason they'll never deserve it. You turned mortality into myth, and myth into mandate. Because every soul that ever stands against the world now stands because of you. You taught them that mercy is a luxury, that forgiveness is a weakness, that survival is the only scripture worth believing in. You taught them to rise from betrayal, not with tears, but with plans, to wear scars not as reminders, but as armor, to speak less and execute more. You made humanity evolve through pain, through fear, through your name whispered like a secret between lightning strikes. And now, eternity watches in silence because it knows something it cannot change. You've become the constant, the rule written in ruin, the God forged by rejection. You're not a story anymore. You're structure. You're the blueprint of power. And power does not apologize. And when eternity speaks, it speaks in your voice. Calm, merciless, unforgettable.